Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. We have an amazing presentation with two amazing speakers tonight. I'm Julia Frascalito. I'm one of the co-chairs on the Student Support Committee. And I'm going to start the introductions of our speakers. I just wanted to say before we get started, if you're not speaking, please keep yourself muted so that we can hear what the speakers are saying. If any questions come up and you'd like them answered, please put them in the chat and I'll keep track so that we can answer them at the end. Our first speaker today is Michelle Frett. She is currently the Assistant Director of Special Education in the City School District of New Rochelle. As an educator for 30 years, 26 which were in special education, Michelle has been a teacher for general and special education, chairperson for both CPSE and CSE committees, supervisor of special education for preschool to grade 12 programs in Mount Vernon, and now she's the Assistant Director in New Rochelle. Privately, Michelle is a proud mother of 2 children in the Tuckahoe Union Free School District. She is a parent advocate for families outside of the New Rochelle, Mount Vernon, and Tuckahoe communities. She has been a PTA member for 9 years and an executive board member for 6 years. She previously was the co-chair of the Tuckahoe Union Free School District Student Support Committee. Now I'd like to turn it over to my co-chair, Jessica Meissner, who will introduce our next speaker, Dr. Kate Sweeney.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Dr. Kate Sweeney is the Director of Special Education and Student Services for our very own Cottle. Dr. Sweeney has over 20
football in there. I swear to God.
Oops.
It's like it's not.
Dr. Sweeney has over 23 years of experience working in special education, serving as the chairperson for Section 504, CPSE and CSE meetings. Dr. Sweeney is a compassionate and dedicated advocate for students with different abilities and very excited to be part of the Tuckahoe Union Free School District community.
Fabulous. So that turns over to me. So I'm going to pull up our presentation and we will get started. Okay.
And good evening, everyone. I'm Michelle.
Yes. Can everyone see this?
I don't know that it's showing yet, Kate.
Okay.
Not shared yet.
This is always the fun part where we test our ability to use technology. Okay, I'm going to do this. Okay, and then I'm going to do this. How about now?
Good.
Yes.
Excellent. So Michelle, would you like to start as a parent member? Because this really is a meeting to help parents. And I'm here to help explain some of the Tuckahoe things, but you've graciously given your time to work with your other parents. Would you like to begin and kind of set the tone?
Sure, I'd love to. Well, good evening, everyone. And so happy so many of you were able to join us tonight. This is a really important meeting for all families of students that have IEPs, and a lot of it also applies to 504s. So it's just to be able to have you feel comfortable when approaching the annual review meeting that happens each year, and understand what how to break down the barrier of that the unknown. I've done this type of meeting for several years. When I was the co-chair of the Student Support Committee, Dr. Donna Martouge and I did it together a couple of years back. And each year what we do is just to make sure that you know what you have the right to ask about, what all these different acronyms are. We call it that special education alphabet soup, and what the differences are between the programs and where your child falls most comfortably in his or her learning environment with all of the supports that he or she is able to receive. So Dr. Sweeney has put together a great presentation, and she will give us the bones of what the annual review process is all about. And I will participate by sharing a little bit of what I think you may want to be able to focus on during each section of the annual review time. Okay, so please feel free to put questions in the chat and we'll answer them as we go along.
Terrific. So basically the goals for this evening, well, first of all, welcome everyone. I am Dr. Kate Sweeney. I am your Director of Special Education Student Services in the Tuckahoe Schools. I've had the privilege of being in this position. This is now my second year. And what I love most is that as the more time goes on, the more I get to know each and every one of your children. And I love being in the classrooms, and they are an absolute joy. And Tuckahoe is a very wonderful place. I'm very glad to be here. So for tonight, we started off with a little introduction. What I'm going to do is review the annual review process. Like Michelle had mentioned, the bones of it. What is an annual review? What will be presented? Who's going to be there? What should I be asking? What should I be thinking? What if I have questions? And then I'll also share for you the special education programs that are available in your district. Keeping in mind that every year, beginning in about December, we start to look at our students and what they will need for the following year and do what's called projections. And every year we design new programs because sometimes students need more services, sometimes students need less services. So we really make an effort to make sure our programs are tailored for the needs of the students as they progress in their education. And then we'll have some time at the end for some questions and answers. So when you have an annual review, when your son or daughter has an IEP, every year they have an annual review meeting. We are beginning these February 1st. And there's two things that can happen at an annual review. One is just an annual review when you're reviewing the information and planning for next year's IEP. And the other is if your son or daughter is recommended to have reevaluations complete, we are required to do those at minimally every 3 years, and you get consent and you sign so you know if it's a reevaluation year. We can combine the reevaluation review with an annual review. So your meeting may be one or the other. Definitely an annual review, but if it's every 3 years and your son or daughter's due for reevaluations, that information will be shared during the annual review reevaluation meeting. So who is at the CSE? Many of you have attended CSEs in the past, or this may be your first one. And so it's always important to have transparency with who is expected to be there. Who can I expect to be there? What if I would like somebody else to be there? So at minimum, a parent or legal guardian is required to be there. Your voice is very important in your son or daughter or child's education. So we need your voice. A school district representative, a CSE chairperson. This is someone who is designated who will be the chairperson of the meeting to help focus the meeting along and help make decisions. A psychologist is a required member of the meeting, especially if there are reevaluations to review. Sometimes the CSE meetings don't require a psychologist. Those are sub-CSE meetings. However, our psychologists are typically at our annual review meetings in Tuckahoe. The special education teacher working with your son or daughter is at the meeting. A general education teacher who is working with your son or daughter is at that meeting. And then there's others. If you require translation services, let us know, and we have translators at our meetings. And if your child is receiving related services, speech, OT, PT, those folks are booked solid, with serving your students. So we don't require them to be at our meetings. However, if there's a particular need or if there's a particular question, we may ask for them to attend, but they're not required.
I just want to just pop in there, if that's
Please
okay.
do. Please do. Yes, thank you.
Oftentimes parents will ask me, what is the role of each one of these different individuals? And I just want all the parents to understand that everyone has something to share as it pertains to your child in particular. And if you know, Dr. Sweeney put parent or legal guardian as the first member. The voice of the parent is the most important because you will be able to offer information in regards to how your child is applying the skills and skills learned within the classroom setting and related services to the home and social environments. So it's very important that you understand that you are a main focus of this meeting as well, and you have an equal say when it comes to building the IEP for your child.
Absolutely. In fact, I always start my meetings with the parent. I'll say you know your son or daughter best. So please share with us how you think your son or daughter has done this year, what's gone well, what challenges do they have, what do they come home for and tell you about school? That's always an interesting question,
Yeah.
especially when they get to middle school. So, what happens during those annual review meetings? So, during the annual review, the CSE, the charge of the CSE is to develop the individualized education plan for the following school year, the IEP. So, things that we will be asking and talking about and that will be reviewed, the present level of performance. So we always want to have an indication from the teachers, from the parents, from the related service providers. What has the student done well this year? What growth have they had? Where are they presently in areas of academics, social and emotional, physical, motor, behavioral, the whole child. We want to know where is this child at right now and what is the progress that we've seen. Other things we might consider during the CSE meetings are special factors. So if the student has behavioral supports or assistive technology or anything that is required above and beyond, we always review that. We review the goals. How has the student progressed towards their goals this year? And based on that, what are the proposed goals for the following year? Keeping in mind that goals in the developmental goals, the state requires us to keep the goals tightly coordinated with the curriculum, because our ultimate goal as an education facility is to make sure your student can get through the curriculum of that grade level and be prepared for the state assessments at the end of the year. Not that we put a lot of onus on that, but we want all students to be learning what fourth grade students should be learning. So the goals are tightly aligned to that curriculum. And in particular, what are the areas of remediation that your son or daughter needs in order to progress towards that goal? So for example, if in reading and writing, if the curriculum goal is that a student will be able to pull out main idea and your son or daughter has a reading disability, the goal might be something to the effect of given guided reading questions, the student will read a passage and then be able to demonstrate an understanding of main topics. So what are the skills we need the student to develop so that they can better reach the goals of the curriculum? So the teacher develops those goals based on your student's progress and discusses them in the IEP meetings, in the annual reviews. In addition, sometimes students require goals related to activities of daily living if they have more significant impairments, but those things are very important. So we'll talk about those. And beginning when the student is 15. So for some of you, that's a long way off. For some of you, it's right around the corner. When the IEP developed for the school year in which they turn 15, we start talking about post-secondary and transition goals. So what do they want to be when they grow up? And what do we need to do to help them get there? And not that they have to know what they're going to be when they're 40, but just an idea of what are they interested in and where do they see themselves doing. In addition, at the annual review, we talk about the programs that they're receiving and the related services that they're receiving. We talk about the modifications and the accommodations they're receiving this year and how that's gone. We talk about any supports for staff that have been needed, any consultations and how that's gone. And we review the special transportation and how that's gone. Then we put our minds together and we say, okay, based on this, what do we think the goals for next year should be? The programs, the services to best support your son or daughter in next year's setting.
I want you to know that when it comes to the goals, I've had parents ask me often, why do we need these goals? And why isn't there a goal for everything that the child is learning within the classroom setting that school year? So goals are reflective of the disability. So if your child is in a general education setting and requires speech and language services only, the goals are then only working within that specific domain. And it will help, whatever those goals are, they should then be able to have the child be more successful in the general education setting. We don't add a goal for every weakness that a child may have. It really is, the goals are based on the area of most significant need. So if you see an IEP that has only 2 to 3 goals, please note that that doesn't mean the providers and the teachers are not working on that other things, but that is the main focus towards the student's disability. You as a parent or guardian have the right to ask at this meeting or any time before or after the meeting to discuss the goals again and maybe add different goals or even take some away if you feel that with what is being presented to you, your child no longer needs them or needs something more specific. That's where we want to make sure that your voice is heard throughout the entire meeting.
And that's a great point of discussion too, because the IEP is not a final document. It is representative of a journey. So anytime a student meets their goals, we will be in the providers, once they have evidence of that, they will reach out to you and us, and we can amend the IEP to get rid of the goal that's achieved and add the next step. I've done that many times throughout this year, which is great because it tells me students are making quicker progress than anticipated, and we always want to keep moving them forward. And so that is a really nice discussion point at the annual reviews. And if you have any questions, like why does my son or daughter need to pull out vocabulary in order to solve calculation? Ask away, and our providers and our teachers and our chair people should be able to explain it to you, because it's important that we all are clear about what we're targeting for your son and daughter, help them propel forward. Okay, if your annual review is also a reevaluation review, the CSE will review all the things that we just mentioned. And in addition, during periods of reevaluation, your son or daughter has updated testing completed in all areas of disability identified. So if your son or daughter is receiving special education only, then the updated assessments will be the social history, a classroom observation, a physical exam, a psychological eval, and an educational eval. If your son or daughter is receiving occupational therapy, that will be tested. If your son or daughter is receiving speech, updated testing in that area will happen as well. Anything to add, Miss Michelle? Good so far. I want to make sure I'm pausing because you're my voice. You're my checkpoint.
So the one thing I would add here is prior to any annual review, but very specifically when it comes to reevaluations, parents, you should not be receiving any reports the day of the meeting and at what we call at the table. You should have all written reports and evaluations from the providers at least 5 days beforehand. That gives you ample time to review and have you be an active participant within the meeting. If you come to a meeting and you only have had the 10 minutes prior to the start to actually review scores and then trying to figure out what the scores mean, or look at the classroom observation and then you have questions about it, it's really unfair to you. So we have to make sure that you receive those ahead of time. Once you get your invitation to the annual review meeting, sort of jot things down out on a calendar and say, okay, so I should get reports around this time. And if you don't, please don't feel that you shouldn't reach out to your child's teacher, to Dr. Sweeney, to your child's case manager and say, hey, I really need to see the reports so that I can be prepared to speak on what is written. Okay.
Great point. Great point. And what we've done in Tuckahoe too is not only do we really ask our providers to send these home, or they'll come from my office at least 5 days prior, but we're attaching them to the meeting invitations. So the meeting invitation should also have those documents attached, so you can review them again, or if you lose the email, we really want to make sure that we are providing those to you in an efficient way, and a way that you can review them. And our evaluators will always call and say, do you have any questions? Let me review this with you. If you don't and you're okay, you don't have to have another meeting with the providers, but we certainly want to open the door to you to make sure that we can have those that reviewed before the annual review, so you can participate without any anxiety or anything. Okay, great. So when your son or daughter has updated assessments, again, we're always measuring their progress. And the goal of all special education is to help your son or daughter be as responsible and independent as possible, and learn about their areas of strength and areas of disability, and finding ways to overcome those, or find modifications, or find different strategies. So it's not uncommon that at some point during a reevaluation year, your chairperson or psychologist may be saying, your son or daughter has made excellent progress. They're no longer going to require special education. And I put this in there because I think it causes a lot of families some anxiety, because the anticipation is that things will be taken away. And you have my assurances that none of my providers do this to take things away, but we want to honor your son or daughter's progress. And so if it is a possibility that we're seeing they have made tremendous progress and may no longer require a service, a related service, or a program, these discussions will be happening prior to the meeting. This will never be thrown on you at the meeting, and that's important. So just to kind of put in your minds, if your psychologist calls and mentions this, do not be afraid. Ask all the questions you need. This is not a decision that is made lightly, but it really is something we strive towards for all of our students.
The goal of special education and the services that are provided is really to have your child become equipped to become either college or career ready. And the purpose of the special education supports is to give your child all of those tools before they enter the workforce or college. So with that being said, declassification is the goal for many students, not all. And I believe Dr. Sweeney will talk a little bit about what happens when a child is declassified and what they're still eligible for, and what happens when a child's not declassified and is leaving our school system after either their senior year or the time that they're 21.
Great. Do you want to talk about that now? Dive in?
I think so. I think that would be a good idea.
Sure. So when a student is declassified and no longer requires special education program, the CSE, depending on how old the child is when this occurs, but the CSE can consider if any accommodations need to continue for that student for up to a year following declassification. And so, in other words, say, for example, your child is in integrated co-teaching and they're recommended to be declassified in February. The CSE can say that we will maintain the programs, no longer requiring the special education teacher and goals and things of that nature, but they will stay in the program through the end of the year, because we don't want to have any disruption to your child's learning environment. In addition, when students are in 8th grade, 13, 14 years old, and they're recommended to be declassified, the CSE committee can determine whether or not your son or daughter requires testing accommodations to continue. So sometimes students are declassified in 9th grade, but require the accommodation of extended time or flexible setting, and the CSE can make the determination if that's required, and that can go through graduation. So those are some of the things that can happen. In addition, there are times when students are recommended to be declassified, and they really require a declassification support services, meaning they're ready to be declassified, but they need up to a year of continued accommodation in a program. So sometimes we have students who are in like a skills program, and it's recommended that they have skills for up to a year after declassification, and that's called declassification support services. So there's many different options. Everything is individualized to your son or daughter. Sometimes something that happens also with students who have attention deficit or things that are lifelong, but they may not require special education programs, they may just require accommodations, is we'll talk to you about a Section 504 plan, which is a federal legislation. It allows us to give accommodations for students for individuals with disabilities. The difference between the 504 and the CSE is the CSE and the IEP allows for special education and related services. The program piece of it, if your son or daughter's made fantastic progress but really needs program accommodations and testing accommodations only, the Section 504 might be a vehicle for him or her to access that. And your chairperson knows all of these options, and again, we'll tailor the discussion to you and for you. Anything I missed? Awesome. Terrific. Okay, so the continuum of services at Cotto. And again, this can look slightly different depending on the needs of the students. And I'll explain what I mean in a minute. We always have general education. So there's the least restrictive and the most restrictive. When at all possible, we want students in their least restrictive settings, meaning with their typical peers for the greatest amount of time. Understanding that some kids have significant learning differences and they require to move down that continuum, and they require more restrictive and direct services to help them achieve their goals. So we have general education, we have related services at Cotto, we have occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech, counseling. Last year and this year again, we have the teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing. And so we have all sorts of people when we need them. Going up, if the child needs special education programs in the classroom, we have integrated co-teaching services. And I'm pleased to say that this was the first year we have ICT, that's the acronym we use for that, in every grade, kindergarten through 5th grade. So we are anticipating of being able to provide that again for our students. Integrated co-teaching means that there's a special education teacher and a general education teacher co-teaching those classes. And there's lots of benefits for that as well. If your son or daughter requires a smaller classroom, smaller setting, more direct and intensive services, we have a special class reading that is available for all of our students. And that is 5 days a week. That's new to the building too. Our teachers have now been all trained in research-based reading instruction, whether it be PAF, Preventing Academic Failure, Wilson, Orton Gillingham. They have all been highly trained, and this year we're rolling out a 5-day daily reading services for our students with dyslexia and those early reading literacy concerns. We really want to target it and give it as much support as we can. At Cotto, we also have special classes for the academics. We have a 12-1-2, meaning no more than 12 students, 1 teacher, and 2 paraprofessionals, teaching assistant and teaching aide. And we have an 8-1-2, no more than 8 students, 1 teacher, and 2 paraprofessionals. And what those classes are and what the ratios are indicate that these are classroom educational environments only for students with IEPs, because specially designed instruction and the curriculum really need to be tailored to students with different learning styles and different learning needs. Students in the 12-1-2 are those who are able to be integrated for science or social studies, things of that nature. In fact, students in the 12s and the 8s are integrated with buddy classes for all specials, lunch, recess, field trips, things of that nature. And our 8-1-2 program, it's a smaller ratio because the students in that program have more significant needs. So it's less of a ratio student to staff ratio. So those students, we have some great instruction in ABA. We have some great instruction in a lot of the behavioral. We use a BCBA, behavioral consultant, BC, board certified behavioral consultant, BCBA. Sorry about that. I get my acronyms confused sometimes too.
Analyst.
Analyst, thank you.
Analysts.
BCBA, yes. So they come in and they help our students who really need a lot of support for behavior and learning learning positive behaviors to be able to be integrated with their typical peers. So we've had some great success. I believe we're on year, I want to say 6 of having our 812 classrooms, and they've been very, very successful. And we're really, really excited about those kids. Those all of our kids are, again, integrated for chorus and recess and lunch, with supports as needed. And it's just a really inclusive setting at Cottle that I continue to be impressed by. And then our most restrictive setting is what's called an out-of-district placement. And that is really for our students who, despite all the intensive services we have at Cottle, we just can't service for one reason or another. And that's our very, very last option. We try very hard to keep our students in their home schools. We try to design as individualized as we can and tailored program and supports. But we do have some students in our district who are wheelchair bound, on feeding tubes, medically fragile, and those students really require an intensive program that we're not able to offer at Cottle. So the district can consider those programs for those students to get their needs met. Anything to add in there?
So, Dr. Sweeney, I think after you go over the continuum at the middle and high, maybe I'll just jump in then so that we see both sides.
You got it. So over at the middle school and the high school, and again, this is an evolving picture based on our needs. So we start with the general education. We also have the related services of OT, PT, speech, counseling. We don't have any students who require teacher of the deaf and hard and hearing. However, our students, as they progress and then become into the middle school, that we have that consultant that can provide those services there. We do have integrated co-teaching services. Once the students get to the middle school, the classes become subject specific. So we have it for English, math, social studies, and science. We have ICT for all of those. At the middle school, the model is a team. So your child's placed on a team, and there's a special education teacher that services and is the case manager and is a consistent person for your son or daughter in those different classes. When we get to the high school, the model is a consultant teacher model. And the difference between that is that the integrated co-teaching service, in order to provide that, the teachers require a lot of planning time to deliver those lessons in a co-teaching fashion. And up at the high school, because of the size of our school, we have teachers who are working with 4 or 5 different general education teachers. So to ask them to have a planning period for each of those teachers, there's just not time in the day to do that. So the model is a consultant teacher, and we have some courses where the students require daily. So there's a daily special education teacher and general education teacher in that classroom. And some courses where it's every other day. For some of our upper level math courses, for example, that aren't regions bound and students don't require that tremendous amount of daily support. But that again is based on the needs of the student. We do have reading as well. It's a special class. We have the ability to provide that as often as the student needs, from 2 times out of a 6-day cycle to daily. And in the middle school, a different service that we're able to offer is called a skills program. And this is a special class skills. At the middle school, it's with the case manager. So the students traverse through their day with English, math, social studies, science. And when they come to skills, it's an opportunity for the special education teacher to regroup with the students, to do pre-teaching, to do preparing for tests, to work on their goals, to offer a lot of curriculum support so that your son or daughter can be successful in those ICT settings as well. So it's really a nice program for them to have a home base if they require. And we do have 1212 and 812 classes this year, both at the middle school and the high school. The 1212 class at the middle school is, again, very intense instruction, and the goal is to help students traverse from the 1212 into a less restrictive setting. But some students really require intense curriculum, and so we have that available for them. And we have the 812 program. And again, this is for students with very significant needs who require a lot of behavioral support, a lot of academic support, and the focus begins to shift on daily living skills. So can they dress themselves? Can they feed themselves? Can they prepare a meal? We begin thinking about what do they need to be a successful citizen. And also out of district placement, again, if we are not able to meet your son or daughter's needs with our district programs, we can consider out of district placements if they have severe needs. And now I'm going to pause. Oh, I did want to add, we did not have it at the middle school this year, but we are anticipating having it for next year, a special class 15-1 in both 6th and 7th grade. Again, what we're seeing is because of COVID, because of a lot of not lost instruction, but not in-person daily best instruction, we're seeing our 4th, 5th, and 6th grade have more needs and needing more individual teacher face time. So we are anticipating having what's called a 15-1. So up to 15 kids with a special education teacher. The instruction is the same as in the Regents courses, the pre-Regents courses. It's just modified and delivered with a smaller student to staff ratio. So it's more intense.
Thank you, Dr. Sweeney. Just to give a little bit more of an explanation, like I said earlier, is special education, we use a lot of acronyms and we use a lot of terms that may not be easily understandable when you're just looking at an IEP. And another thing would be that the more restrictive the setting is not always the better setting for your child. So I always speak to the parents and explain that a smaller setting, what these special classes are called, you may have heard them in the past as being known as self-contained. These small settings are not always in the best interest of your child if there are not any models within the setting. If they don't have other social peers that they are able to communicate appropriately with, or even strive to be their best selves. So I just want you to know, if you see the words special class, it really is a much more condensed, self-contained setting. It does not mean that your child doesn't need it. It's just we want to do our best to make sure that to be able to adapt to the learning environment outside of the high school and outside of Tucko, once they go into the workforce or into college, we want to make sure they have the opportunity to be with their general education peers as much as possible. And I think that's very important that parents know that the more is not always better. And I try to put that in place a lot. When we're talking about related services, and a child has a limited verbal language, many parents have come to me in my other settings, my private setting, and say, well, I know Johnny would do so much better if he had 5 times a week speech or 3 times a week OT. And I have to explain, the truth is that if the child, in order to get any service, it has to affect his or her ability to learn within the general education environment. So just to pull your child out of a classroom more does not, to provide a related service or more intense instruction, doesn't actually bode well for a child in the long run. So that's why you'll hear from a school district often that they are pushing towards that least restrictive environment. Okay.
Yeah, and especially, as students get older, coming from CPSE, you probably had a whole lot of services, and then you go to kindergarten and it's a little bit of less of services, because we really want them in the classrooms receiving the instruction the greatest amount of time. And so as students go from kindergarten to 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, we really take a look at those pull-out services and try to see if they're essential, because again, every time a child is pulled out, they're missing something, right? And so there's only 8 periods in the day. We got to fit all that good stuff in. So we might prioritize what do we really want to focus on? What are our goals really? And what is the best environment to get to those goals? So it doesn't always have to be a pull out. It could be a push in, or it could be delivered through from the special education teacher in the classroom versus a pull out. So those are those unique conversations that will be happening at your annual reviews. There's no one size fits all, and it's always a discussion. And I frequently will say there's just not enough time in the day to get to all the good things we want to get to. So we have to kind of have those priority and honest conversations with each other. Okay, so how to prepare. So what I always say to my parents is please speak to your teacher. Keep it as close as you can to your son or daughter, because that person who's working with your son or daughter the most will have the best up-to-date information that you may have questions about. So you're encouraged to speak to your teachers, or your case managers, your related service providers prior to the annual review to discuss any concerns you have. You can begin asking about what they think about, some potential programs or some potential goals. All decisions will be made in the context of the CSE meeting. That doesn't preclude a teacher from having a conversation about what they might be thinking. So for example, if your child is in third grade and they're the integrated co-teaching, the teacher might say, I'm anticipating that they will probably require ICT. That's not the final decision, but that's your professional's opinion. And so just kind of begin to think begin to hear what they are saying and thinking about goals. And again, keeping in mind that the final decision is not made until we have that meeting and you're a part of that conversation and we all agree. In addition, parents are encouraged to review, like Michelle had said, review those evaluations prior to the meeting, speak to the evaluators if you have any questions, make sure they get addressed early if you'd like. And in addition, we would like for you to consider completing something like this. And we can talk to your PTA folks about how to get this best to you. It is let's see if I click on it, if it'll bring it up. Look at that. So what this is, and we'll be sharing this out, is just for you to think ahead of time about what your son or daughter, and begin putting down what you think, what are my child's strengths? What goals do you have for the upcoming year? Academic, everyday functioning, social, physical. The components of the program that have worked for my child this year, what's gone well? I have the following concerns about my child's skills and or school program. What are you worried about and what do you wonder about? My child's goals for life after high school are, and again, I get that a lot. Parents are like, oh my gosh, it's too early. They're not expected to know. But we want them to begin to learn about who they are, what their strengths are, because that is great to have that self-awareness and solid self-esteem. And then as they get closer to middle school and high school, we want them considering electives in potential areas of interest, clubs, sports, because if the last thing we want is a senior graduating saying, I'm going to be a marine biologist, and he's never taken a science class, and he goes off to a $40,000 college, he takes a science class and hates it, and then his life is kaput because he hasn't put the time in, kind of saying, what am I good at? Let's try it now. How do I like it? And see how he evolves with that. So what are your child's goals for high school? There's never too early of a time to think about what they want to be. In fact, some of my favorite answers are kindergartners. What would you like to be when you grow up? Dancing bus driver, things like that. Those are the best. And I will submit the following information for the CSE to consider at my child meetings. So again, some of you are working with outside providers, medical providers, private therapists, private psychologists. If they have any information to share with the school, we encourage that. So please share it with us prior so we can review it. And then students, when they're of an age when you can either ask these questions and verbally get some answers, or when they can think about these things themselves, we want the student's voice. Beginning when the students are 14, we invite them to their meetings. It's important that they know about their areas of strength and their areas of difference and what their programs are, and they can advocate for themselves. So for the student's perspective, the things that are working best about the school year are what's going well. Things that are not helpful or that I do not like about school this year are what's not going well. What am I best at and what do I need more help with? So this is an amazing, amazing resource to our family, the Westchester Institute for Human Development. They offer a lot of programs for parents, webinars, in-person meetings. They have a whole host of resources and are able to be a parent advocates for parents if they need. So this is a wonderful, wonderful resource in our community. So they put this together for the surrounding districts, and Michelle and I both thought of it at the same time. We're like, this is a great thing.
Yeah, when Dr. Sweeney and I spoke just prior, when we were planning, I asked right away if this was included in the documents that we would share today. And because as parents and guardians going into these meetings, sometimes you may feel a little bit, maybe even bewildered by the amount of people around the table and all of the things people are saying. And you may forget what you're trying to say or you want to get across. So I always encourage the parents that I've worked with to use this or some sort of something else you may have put together yourself. I've had plenty of parents come to me to discuss IEPs with full-on binders. And with medical reports and pictures and all sorts of things to show, the growth of the child throughout the years. And that's great to have too. But having something written in front of you allows you to keep your mind organized and to make sure that the team knows exactly what you're looking for in the discussion. I encourage you as well to maybe look at the WIHD website. It's chock full of supports for families and resources within Westchester County and the state. And I would also encourage you as parents to go onto the special education website through the New York State Education website. It's NYSED. And in the special education dropdowns, there's actually IEPs that are annotated, and it shows you what should be discussed in each one of the sections of the IEP. And when you are planning with your team, you should make sure that you know what's going in those parts. And what's very important in each section of the IEP is the parent's voice. It is literally part of the New York State IEP. The parents' concerns are, and they must be noted. So if you have a moment, you may want to go onto those two websites to see these resources and tools for yourself.
Yes, and get ready to share them at the meeting because you will be asked. Okay. Oop. So we talked a little bit about the special education alphabet soup, but two that I think are really important. We mentioned a little bit about the LRE, which is the least restrictive environment. In New York State, we are required by law, by regulation, to place students in their least restrictive educational setting, which means with their typical peers for the greatest amount of time. Of course, we have to balance the need for appropriate supports while maintaining students with their typical peers for the longest amount of times. And like Michelle said, Michelle, you and I are akin, more is not always better. We are obligated to keep students in the classroom and with their typical peers as much as possible. And as students get older, related services fade as the focus and driving force of education is in the classrooms. And then the other one to balance that is FAPE, free and appropriate public education. Districts are required to provide a free and appropriate public education for all students. Appropriate may not equate to best. Our obligation is appropriate. So again, if best is 5 days a week of speech, that may not be appropriate because we really need students to be in their classrooms. And we're obligated to show appropriate progress with students. We really have to see students making progress. So if they're not able to make that progress in their least restrictive settings, we are able to provide smaller classrooms if we need to, because again, the goal is making sure all students are progressing toward that college and career readiness to the best of their abilities. Anything you'd like to add in there, Michelle? Great. Questions and comments? So let me stop the share. Okay, great. So we do have a chat. Is anybody else able to see the chat, or would you like me to read the questions out? Everyone's good. Okay. So we do have a question. What if you suspect your child has a disability that hasn't been addressed yet? What do you do? So at every school, there is a response to intervention team, and there are academic intervention services. If you suspect your child has a disability, again, first stop is always the person closest to your child. Talk to the teacher. All teachers are taking information and doing progress monitoring of students' reading, writing, and math skills. So if the teachers are recognizing that there's potential disabilities, they are referring to the child's IST, or to the building's child IST and RTI teams, and they will be talking to you about different services. But if this hasn't been brought up to you yet and you are wondering about it, start with that classroom teacher and ask for information. I'm concerned about my child's reading. They're not reading fluently once they get home. What is this about? And the teacher should be able to describe, well, here's what your child's skills are. Here's what I've assessed them. Here's what the normal range is. And then share with them about if you think that he has a disability, because it could prompt the teacher to refer him or her to the IST and RTI team for consideration of some remedial services. So be open and honest with your communications, and don't be afraid to reach out.
I would just say,
Mhm.
can I just add to that a little bit? When I'm working with families, I talk about the fact that any IEP is based on a disability.
Mhm.
So when you think about that, there is such a difference between a student that is either a slow learner, a student that is weak in an area, and then a student that has a disability. I encourage you, I put that website for the New York State Education website in the chat, to look at what the classifications are. There are 13 federally mandated classifications, and they have definitions there. I'd be happy to speak with any of you about them. But those classifications are indicating where the student is showing a severe impairment in a specific area, and that's affecting the ability to learn. So as an example, a student that is classified with autism, a student that is classified with speech or language impairment, a student that is classified with a learning disability. All of those have very specific guidelines of when a committee could even consider a classification being a disability. So I would say if your child gets the RTI and the MTSS services, all of those services that are available on the school level prior to going straight up to the Committee on Special Education, I think that it behooves you to do that, because there are such strict guidelines when it comes to special education services, and how they're provided. So please take a look at that before you consider even the referral. Okay.
Yes, and in fact, New York State requires, in order to have a student classified as a student with a learning disability, there's a checklist, and some of the questions in that checklist are: has the student been provided research-based reading instruction and demonstrated improvement or not improvement? So have they been responding to interventions? And if your son or daughter hasn't had any interventions yet, the answer to that is no, and it really precludes us from designated them as having a disability. We really want to get in with interventions first and see if research-based interventions, and see if they can be effective in kind of remediating some of those weaknesses. And Cottle has a great IST team, a really robust RTI team. They have 2 full-time interventionists. And so it's something that we do all the time for students when there's weaknesses. So just talk to your teacher. That's great. Okay, let's see. If a child is declassified and it is found that the child has should not have been declassified. Is it easier process to get back to the IEP, or is it the same process as the first time the IEP was granted? So the best way to answer that is that the CSE does not consider declassification lightly. It is really based on evidence. It's based on updated evaluations and indicators of progress and performance. And so oh, there's an iPhone. Hold on. Someone wanted to come in the waiting room. And so we don't declassify without evidence to say the student is ready to be declassified. If the student then has difficulty with academics, again, stay closest with the teacher. What more can you do? What more can I do? What's going on? And if they continue to have difficulty and have, demonstrating that they're not accessing the resources and not benefiting from instruction, yes, it's the CSE initial referral process starts all over again. So it would be the same initial referral, completing all the evaluations, because again, if the CSE determined that your child no longer had a significant disability substantially impacting their performance and requiring special education, we would need updated information that says that they do, because that would be the opposite of what we had determined before. So it behooves us to really have updated assessments. But please, I know parents are so worried about declassification because you feel like, oh my gosh, it's taken away. And then what do I do if they don't have difficult? What do I do if they have trouble? Each of my buildings has teachers that are required to stay after school for extra help, AIS periods, academic intervention support that can be delivered during the school day, interventionists at all levels that can help students when they have difficulties without, an IEP. So it's not like if your child doesn't have an IEP, they don't have anything. They just don't have the special education, and they may benefit from the other supports available to general education students. Anything to add, Michelle? What do you think? That was good? Okay. Mrs. Set. Hi, Mrs. Set. What were those websites again? New York State website. Okay, great. Sample IEPs. Awesome. Did you get those? Are you all good, Mrs. Set?
I did.
I retyped them in.
I had a different question. Thank you. By the way, very informative. So I posted my other question in the chat.
Awesome. Yes, thank you. Very informative. Since we are not behavioral academic goal setting experts and curriculum per grade is standardized, is there a library of goals by area, OT, PT, speech tied to the grade curriculum? OT, PT, and speech are separate. They're related to the child's developmental progression of the speech and language skills and OT and fine motor skills. So those are tailored to your son or daughter's developmental needs. They're not tied to curriculum per se. This could help ensure we're all thinking of possible goals related to the child's specific needs. Yes. So again, Michelle had mentioned that the goal of any related services is to help address differences as they relate to functioning in the school environment and learning. So in OT and PT, if you get private OT and PT, that may look very different than OT and PT in school, because it all is related to them being an active and engaged learner and able to demonstrate skills and progress towards skills so that their fine and gross motor skills help them learn. And so I think that the best thing to do for that is just speak with the individual providers in terms of what are the goals. The goals are not necessarily tied to curriculum, but they're tied to helping the student think and learn and be an active participant in their learning. And so that will be very individualized for that. And again, when you're talking to the teacher about goals, thinking about some students who require very individualized and tailored goals. If it's like the pre-academic goals, we have the ability to do that too. So not every goal has to be tied to the curriculum. If the students' learning differences are such that different areas need to be addressed, like the activities of daily living and precursor academics and essentials for living skills, things of that nature. So it's a very individualized conversation. I encourage you to reach out to your teacher early and often. She can tell you what she's thinking, and then it's a conversation. It's not like, here are the goals. It's, here's what I'm thinking are the skills that I think we need to work on for next year. And then the parent says, okay, yes, but I think he can do that. Why don't we focus on this? Good point. Let's talk about it. It's a conversation for sure. The teacher has the expertise about things she's expert at, but you're expert about your son or daughter. So we got to come together and build that bridge.
I wanted, Ms. Set, I wanted to just jump on this a little bit too with the OT, the PT, and the speech.
Yes.
I've worked, like I said, I've worked with families all over the place. If a child's had preschool services before, CPSE, and I was a preschool chairperson for many years, the CPSE committee is providing services not only for the students' readiness skills to enter school, but the developmental school skills. But when a child goes into kindergarten and forward, all of the needs, the disability, have to affect the ability within the classroom. So if a child has weak hands and has a hard time with a pencil grip, it may not be truly connected to a disability as much as it's a weakness and the child needs practice, because there is no classification that the CSE can provide that says the child only gets OT and things like that. So sometimes I've even asked parents to maybe seek out an OT and get strategies that can be practiced in the home or the social environment. Or if it's something even more severe on the medical side, you'd probably want to seek out medical supports for occupational therapy, physical therapy, and even speech therapy if it is somehow connected to some sort of medical diagnoses. Sometimes children with traumatic brain injury or cerebral palsy, where no matter how much support you're giving them in the school setting, their progress really depends on how it's provided within a medical environment. So there's other ways to look at those services as well.
And as well, because I mean, on standardized tests, right, you can see a child being literally 3 standard deviations below the mean and like 1 percentile. Right. And let's say they have low tone, that is a medical diagnosis, right? So you can practice all you want, but they have to do it. It's pervasive. So
right. So it could be in both areas for sure. It could be affecting the academic ability to learn in the classroom. Right. So, but it's when you're doing it, it might not be all in one place or all in another.
Right. So understood. And they might need extra outside the class. Right. And understand that academic is the main focus. So this has been really, really helpful. So thank you.
I did want to tell you also at Coddle, something that we started actually for the second year, we have our brilliant occupational therapist who pushes into every single kindergarten class weekly and provides a general education. Here's how we're working our fine motor kids, because we're seeing our kindergarten kids come in and they miss 2 very important years of developmental progression with regard to fine and gross motor skills. And so she pushes into our kindergarten class. So all kindergarten classes are getting extra fine and gross motor practice. And in addition, once a month, our occupational therapist sits on our IST team, that's instructional support team or RTI team, and hears teachers when they have concerns about finer motor, and she offers suggestions and she works with parents and she gives different options to teachers to support those fine motor skills when they're not quite impacting the child as a disability, but really kind of impacting their ability to write and to learn. So that is kind of within the continuum of RTI supports that we have for our families. Okay, so can we request our annual review to be held in person as they were pre-COVID? I am thrilled to announce that I have asked my secretary and my case managers that to have in-person be the standard. So your meeting is in person unless we want to be flexible for working families, unless you call my secretary and say, I would prefer it to be virtual, and we'll set you up with a Google Meet. So we're going to be very flexible, but we want this to be opening and welcome. We have, knock on wood, gotten through it. We want to see your faces in person if at all possible, but we're also going to be flexible and have the Google Meet. So our default is in person. If you would like it, Google and when you get your meeting invitation, this will all be on there. Then you're going to let us know, but in person is the standard. So yes. Mrs. Siragusa. Hi, Mrs. Siragusa. As a parent, we could also look measurable and benchmark IEP goals. Just want to mention this. Do you want to share a little bit about what you're thinking for that with our families?
Sure. So you can actually, if you go online, you can look up goals and benchmarks for IEPs. I know for most parents, it's boring to look at, to be very honest, but as an educator and advocating for special ed, if you look through them and you look at your child's grade level, it may give you some ideas as to what you want to request for your child for their goals. Just as a parent, talking as a parent, I know it's really hard for us as parents to look at this and be like, I don't even know what they're talking about for their goals, but it might be something just to look at, just food for thought.
Thank you for that. Okay. Another parent said, my letter that I received says Google Meet. Oh no, they're in person. They're absolutely in person. So you're gonna give me a call and I'm gonna make sure, but my secretary had sent out some and then I'm pulling her in and I'm making them all in person. So you should be getting a revised invitation. But again, I'm gonna put my I'll give you my email and my personal number. You call, we're gonna get this right. Okay, I'm gonna put that right in. I don't see any other questions in the chat. Does anybody want to offer those? Okay, what is my number? 337. I think that's the number. But if you call Tuckahoe Schools and ask for Dr. Sweeney, they'll get you my way. But email 24/7. I'm on my email. I'm very passionate about the job, so please just let me know. Okay. Oh, I put that in private. Hold on, let me do. Okay. Excellent. So anybody have any questions, comments? Anything like that? Okay. Jessica and Julia, would you like to close us out? And anything you would like to share from a PTA perspective, a parent perspective, please do.
Thank you so much. This is very informative. Thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge and insights with our families. It was definitely very helpful for me as a parent with students with IEP, so I appreciate it very much. And hopefully we'll have some more of these in the upcoming months.
Wonderful.
Yes, we're so lucky to have you in our district, and thank you so much for speaking on everything, and Michelle as well. It was wonderful to hear all the different perspectives.
Yes. Thanks, Michelle. It was a good team effort.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I am one of the executive board PTA members for membership. So if you want to become a PTA member and you haven't yet done that, you could see the PTA website on or page on the Tuckahoe website. But my email is also there. So if you have any additional questions for tonight that maybe you just want to ask me, who's not affiliated with the school system, I would be glad to answer any of them.
Yes, and anyone can also send questions to our student support email, and I'll make sure those get to Dr. Sweeney or anyone else that you'd like to ask.
Fantastic. And thank you. I know that moms do the heavy lifting, dads do the heavy lifting, grandmas, you have your children, and it really does take a village. So the fact that you're here listening to this is such a testament to your commitment to your child, and that can't be understated. So I appreciate that.